So, it's the end of yet another week, and here on this channel that means one thing and one thing only. Every weekend, I post an episode of this series we do called Your Take Not Mine, where I turn to you, the viewers, to give me your hottest NBA takes of the week based on what's going on at the time, and I then choose my favorite submissions and discuss them in a video. This week we had the official beginning of the 2022 NBA regular season, and a lot has already happened, so of course we have plenty to discuss. In order to submit your takes, I make a community post on either the day of or the day before the video, similar to the one that you see on your screen now, so if you want a chance to be featured in a future episode, be sure to stay on the lookout for that. Before we start though, it turns out about 49% of you watching right now aren't even subscribed to the channel, so please, if you enjoy the content, consider hitting the subscribe button, as not only does it help out a ton, but I'd also very much appreciate it. Now with that being said, let's begin. The first take we'll be discussing comes to us from Gibran, and he says that Morant is starting to pull away from Zion Williamson as the best player of the 2019 NBA draft class. So, with the beginning of the regular season coming about this week, every team has gotten a few games under their belt already, and there have certainly been quite a few standouts, with Morant being one of them. In the Grizzlies' first game of the year, he dropped 37 points and dished out 6 assists in a win against the Cavaliers. Then, in the team's second game, he dropped 28 points and dished out 8 assists in a win against the Los Angeles Clippers. So not only is he producing at an impressive level, but he's leading his team to wins early on too. Morant has strangely been a player that has found himself in a lot of overrated conversations by fans over the last year or so, and any of you who have watched these Your Take Not Mine videos for a while know I never agreed with that sentiment, so I'm glad things are starting to shift the opposite direction now after a hot start for him. Now, with that being said, going back to the original take at hand comparison with Zion Williamson, it becomes more interesting. Zion is coming off of a season where he was completely dominant in the paint at a historically great level, as he averaged 27 points per game last year, but once again, he came into training camp this year out of shape, he's injured again and has been several times already in the past in his short career, and there are legitimate reasons to be concerned about him moving forward. But with that said, I wouldn't say anything definitive about this topic until he gets back onto the court healthy. Right now, sure, Morant is playing exceptionally well, and it has translated to a playoff appearance last year and a hot start again this year, but it's hard to judge Zion until he's back healthy. The next take we'll be discussing comes to us from Stamey, and he says that the trade the Lakers were offered featuring Buddy Hield was a better deal for them than the Russell Westbrook trade that they chose to make instead. This was a big topic of discussion during the offseason at the time that it all went down, and now, for the rest of the year, it will be something that people will be calling back to whenever the Lakers struggle. Basically, the Lakers seemed to have a trade all lined up to acquire Buddy Hield from the Sacramento Kings, but last minute they backed out of that deal in order to pursue the trade for Russell Westbrook that they ultimately ended up making. Westbrook is the bigger name and better talent in a vacuum, but Hield, many argued, was the better fit for what the Lakers needed, and after an 0-2 start for the Lakers, those that were in that camp have become even louder. Westbrook had a pretty abysmal debut with the team, shooting 4 of 13 from the field in a loss where he looked completely lost and without a real role, and the next game he scored 15 points, but didn't really play much better as the team lost yet again. The Lakers were supposed to be getting back on track to title contention this year, and they were many people's pick to win the Western Conference and the NBA Finals, so while it's still extremely early, there is reason to have some concern here. The floor spacing has been predictably troubling, which is something Buddy Hield would have helped them with as a fantastic shooter of the ball, and he doesn't need the ball in his hands to be effective like Russell Westbrook does, which would have been better with players like LeBron James and Anthony Davis, who you don't want to take touches away from. On top of all of that, the price tag for Hield was much lower than what the Lakers had to give up to get Russell Westbrook in that deal, so honestly, with all of that taken into consideration, I agree with this take. And while it is a long year, and Russell Westbrook can definitely prove his talent is worth it, I personally would have sided with the Buddy Hield trade. The next take we'll be discussing comes to us from COD for Life, and he says that with all of the chemistry issues surrounding the league right now, the Bucks should be the favorites to win the championship again. This one kind of ties into the last take we just discussed, as the Lakers are definitely a team that need a lot more time to gel with this whole new roster they've put together around LeBron James and Anthony Davis. Looking at a roster on paper with big names and actually having those names play together on the court are completely different things, and sometimes players just don't complement each other like other teams' players do despite being objectively more talented. The same thing can be said about the Brooklyn Nets, who haven't really looked that great to start this year, as they're now off to a 1-2 start and getting blown out by Milwaukee head-to-head in the season opener. The Nets and the Lakers were many people's favorites to win the title before the season started, and despite being the reigning champions, the Bucks didn't get that much respect in those conversations at all. After their opening game, they did suffer a few injuries, as they were without Jrue Holiday and Brook Lopez, amongst a few others, in their next game against the Miami Heat, but at full strength, this is a unit that's not only as talented as anyone else in the league, but they're also as cohesive and clicking chemistry-wise as anyone else too, which is arguably most important when it comes to playoff success in the NBA. If I had to pick, I would probably choose the Bucks to go back-to-back right now, but obviously a lot can change over the course of an 82-game season. And finally, the last take we'll discuss today says that Dwight Howard is a top 75 player of all time. So if you're out of the loop, this one is referring to the NBA releasing their updated all-time player list of the 75 best players in the history of the NBA, and somehow Dwight Howard was snubbed from that list. They originally had a top 50 list that released a while ago, and a lot of the players from the early days of the NBA were on that list, and somehow, in this updated version, every player from that list remained, with only 25 new names getting added, instead of cutting those players that obviously have gotten passed up in the recent years, and giving everyone that deserves a spot in recognition the place they deserve. Players like Paul Arizin, Dave DeBoucher, and others that you've probably never heard of from the 1950s are on this list, but guys like Dwight Howard and Klay Thompson were snubbed, and it's honestly just ridiculous that we have to keep pretending that the players from the old era of the league are better. Did they pave the way for where the league is now? Yeah, of course they did. But have better players come along and passed them up eventually? Also, yes, without question. Dwight Howard is a player that you shouldn't hesitate to put in your top 50 players of all time lists, let alone top 75. So I wholeheartedly agree here, and the thing is that the list the NBA put out was just bad top to bottom, not just with the Dwight Howard snub. And with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below what you think about the takes we discussed. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.